Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This is a wonderful turnout for us, and it's a pleasure to bring IUPUI, IU, and the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy up to this part of town. My name is Amir Pasek. I am the Dean, the Eugene R. Temple Dean of the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and on behalf of our school and IUPUI, I am pleased to welcome you this evening. We have much to celebrate this evening. Indiana University will celebrate its 200th anniversary in 2020, and today we begin the festivities. The Lake Lecture is honored as the first official event in the Indiana University Bicentennial Lecture Series. We want to thank Indiana University for their support. IUPUI will also mark its 50th anniversary of founding beginning in July of 2018. And we at the school and the Lake Institute are very pleased to be part of this nationally acclaimed urban research campus. For us at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, we are this year celebrating 30 years from our founding as the Center on Philanthropy. And among the ways that we are celebrating our 30th anniversary is through bringing nationally and internationally known leaders in philanthropy to Indianapolis and IUPUI. Our first speaker was Naguib Sumar of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and he discussed the foundation's work in promoting philanthropy. Our second speaker was Larry Kramer, president of the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, who spoke about the foundation's efforts to save or improve the institution of Congress. And tonight, we are very pleased to have our third in the series. And if you're available, please do join us on March 22nd when we'll have our fourth and final 30th anniversary speaker, Joel Fleischman from Duke University, who will speak on his new book, Putting Wealth to Work. You can register on our website. Tonight, we also mark an important anniversary of the 15th Thomas H. Lecture, which has been a series of thought-provoking public conversations around issues of faith and giving. Before I introduce the director of the Lake Institute, allow me to take a moment to recognize a few of the many distinguished guests that are with us tonight. First of all, we have the Lake Institute Advisory Board, and we very much like to thank them for being with us today. We also have members of the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy Board of Visitors, and also Lake Institute Board Chair Elizabeth Lynn and Founding Director Bill Enright and his wife Edie. Among members of the Lilly Family School of Board of Visitors, we also have lifetime member Irene Lilly McCutcheon and her husband Bill with us tonight. We also have former Board Chair Melanie Klaus with us tonight from the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and Ellen Rosenthal is joining us as well. We would also like to say hello to our friends from the Lilly Endowment. Also thank State Senator Victoria Spartz for joining us. And I want to thank all of you our distinguished guests, for joining us this evening. We are very pleased that Scott Harrison, founder and CEO of CharityWater, is speaker for this milestone Lake Lecture. And we're looking forward to hearing his personal story, his perspective on the global water crisis, and how a life change is touching now lives across the world. We are also eager to hear his thoughts on reinventing charity for new generations with greater transparency and effectiveness. We are also proud to have our alumnus and former Lake Institute colleague, Rich Klopp, with us, who will be introducing Scott. We also have many bright young leaders in faith and philanthropy gathered here today in this audience, and it is my special privilege to introduce one of them, David King, the Karen Lake Buttry Director, Lake Institute on Faith and Giving. David is also Assistant Professor of Philanthropic Studies, and he was previously an Assistant Professor at the Memphis Theological Seminary. His recent research focuses on the rise of evangelical relief and development NGOs, religious humanitarianism, and religion's engagement with international affairs. He is an author of the forthcoming work, Seeking to Save the World, The Evolution of World Vision, American Evangelicalism, and Global Humanitarianism. David is passionate about research and teaching, an ordained minister who has served local churches and national faith-based organizations. He also thrives by facilitating conversations with faith leaders, donors, and fundraisers around the intersections of faith and giving. His PhD is from Emory University, his master's in divinity from Duke, and his bachelor's from Stanford University, both receiving summa cum laude upon graduation. He was named one of 10 young scholars in American religion by the Center for the Study of Religion and American Culture, and he was recently named one of Indianapolis Business Journal's 40 under 40 young professionals to watch. I'm happy to add that David was joined in this year's class by master's degree alumnus Derek Feldman, founder and president of Chieve, and Angie Carr-Klitsch, president and CEO of Employ Indy. And since shameless promotion seems to be in fashion, if you'd like to join the likes of these folks, the application period is now open for our graduate programs, both at the master's and the certificate level. Please join me in welcoming David King.
Thank you, Amir. It's an honor to represent the School of Philanthropy, Lake Institute, our board, our amazing staff, and the dozens of partners with which we work as we seek to foster a deeper understanding of the ways that faith and giving inspire and inform one another, and through research and education and public conversation. These are topics that I believe go to the heart of the lives of the individuals and families. They're a sign of healthy institutions, faith communities, and nonprofits of all kinds. And I believe that they're a central thread in the fabric of strong and vibrant communities. These are questions that allow us to get to know one another more deeply, our values and motivations, and help us shape our dialogue in the public square. I think these conversations are alive and well here in Indianapolis. And that's why I'm excited to become a Hoosier, to live and work here in central Indiana, and to bring Scott Harrison to engage with us. On behalf of Lake Institute, I also want to thank our sponsors that have helped make this event possible. Again, we are honored to be a part of the Indiana University Bicentennial Lecture Series. Their support has been integral to this event. And we're also grateful for our other lead sponsors, Water for Good and Indiana Philanthropy Alliance. I'm grateful for the friendship of Rich Klopp and Marissa Manlove and their leadership of these institutions in their distinct spheres, water and philanthropy, that define the topic of our talk tonight. And I'd also like to thank our other sponsors, Edge Mentoring, Dave Neff and his board, mentors and mentees, as well as St. Luke's United Methodist Church. The way that this church opens its lovely space for events like this demonstrates your own commitment to making our community stronger. I'd be remiss if I did not publicly thank our staff team at Lake Institute for all their hard work for months to coordinate this event, and our program manager, Ann Brock, deserves particular thanks. And finally, it's my privilege to welcome Rich Klopp, CEO of Water for Good, to introduce our Thomas H. Lake lecturer, Scott Harrison. Rich is a global citizen with a lifetime experience around the world, particularly in Africa, and I'm proud to say that Rich holds his PhD from the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and was a former associate director of Lake Institute on faith and giving. In fact, I don't know if Rich remembers, but Rich was one of the first people that I met coming to Indianapolis years before I came to work at Lake, and his encouragement was key in leading me to explore this path that would eventually lead me to Lake Institute. So it's a delight to welcome Rich to introduce Scott.
It is great to be back at the Lake Lecture. When I was here before, I was running around and back doing what other people are doing now, and it's really cool to see it from the front. And you've grown quite a bit. But it's a real privilege. Thank you to Lake Institute and the Lilly School of Philanthropy for the opportunity to introduce someone who's very important to the work of our organization, Water for Good, Scott Harrison. So I have had, since working at Lake Institute, so since 2011, the privilege of working for Water for Good, an Indiana nonprofit. We call it Indiana's best kept secret. We are the largest water implementing organization in the poorest country in the world, Central African Republic, and I want everybody in Indiana to know about this. So we've partnered with CharityWater since just about the beginning, 2007, and have done extensive work in the country together. I thought about, there are many ways I could introduce Scott, but I thought I would use a bit of a story or something that's very close to the heart of those of us that work in Central African Republic. I was thinking of the people of Central African Republic that Scott knows, that we know that we've worked with who can't be here tonight to thank him. And so I wanted you to know that in 2013, when the last civil conflict broke out in this country, the bulk of the funders and water partners that worked with us, American organizations, pulled out because of the violence and the insecurity of the country. There was one organization that stuck with the people of Central African Republic throughout, and it's the organization you're going to hear about from Scott Harrison tonight. The people of Central Africa, there are people in Central Africa alive tonight because of you, Scott, and the work of CharityWater, and we can't say thank you enough on their behalf. Scott Harrison is recognized by Fortune and Forbes and Fast Company as one of the world's most innovative young leaders. In 11 years, with the help of more than 1 million donors worldwide, CharityWater has raised more than $293 million and funded more than 24,000 water projects in 24 countries. And I found out last night that Scott Harrison had never been to Indiana. So Hoosiers, join me in showing him some Hoosier hospitality as we welcome him to the stage. Scott Harrison.
You weren't supposed to do that. You outed me. It is indeed my first time in Indiana. Thanks for the generous introduction, and it's been great to work with you guys over the years. Everyone is so nice here. I come from New York City. You know, people are talking to me in elevators. I'm just not used to that. It's an honor to be here and to share a little bit of our story tonight. So I'm going to talk about my personal journey, how I got into this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about water, and then talk about the organization and kind of reimagining charity, or what we've tried to do. So I wore the all black for you, trying to represent New York. We have a big blizzard at the moment, so the weather's actually better here than back home. And I'm excited to spend the evening with you. So I'll start at the beginning. So when I was 4 years old, I was born in Philadelphia. This is mom and dad. Middle-class family. He was a salesman at a manufacturing firm. She was a writer for the local newspaper. And when I was 4, we moved from Philly to the suburbs to get closer to his new job. We moved into this house. Now, unbeknownst to us, there was a massive problem with this house. And a few months after moving in, on New Year's Day, my mom walks across the bedroom and she collapses unconscious. And we rush her to the hospital. After a long series of blood tests, they find massive amounts of carbon monoxide in her bloodstream. And we find that this house we moved into has a carbon monoxide gas leak. So my dad finds the source of it, which was this heater. He rips it out, throws it to the curb. My dad and I got a little sick, but we were only spending the evenings in the house, and my mom was spending all day fixing it up, just basically slowly dying. So she doesn't die, but her immune system from this point on is irreparably destroyed, and she goes from, super mom, super wife. She was perfectly healthy, flying around the world with my dad, a successful journalist, to a person living effectively in a bubble, who couldn't function in the world. And my earliest memories of mom are connected to oxygen, wearing these charcoal masks. She eventually moved into a tile bathroom where everything was covered in tinfoil. And just everything normal for maybe you and I made her sick, whether it was perfume or soap or car fumes. So she wore these masks and just tried to isolate herself from the world. So family planning stopped. I was an only child, and I was immediately put into a caregiver role. So I was doing the cooking, I was doing the cleaning, I was taking care of the house. And my parents had a deep Christian faith. So to the surprise of many of their friends, they decided not to sue the gas company for gross negligence. They took a check, I think, of $1,200 as, sorry, we destroyed your life. And they just didn't want to become bitter. And they believed that God would make sense of this tragedy and someday might even heal mom. So I grew up that good Christian kid, playing piano on Sundays in the Methodist church with the little suit and tie on, playing Jesus Loves You in front of 1,000 people. And I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, I didn't curse. I really played by the rules. Oh, I think you know where this is going. Until the age of 18. And then, something in me just kind of snapped. I had been looking out for mom. I'd been playing by the rules. And I discovered this place called New York City. And I was interested in rebelling, and I realized that you could do a really amazing job of that in New York City. And in fact, there was a job where you could get paid to drink for a living, and it was called a nightclub promoter. So if you could get the right people inside the right nightclubs, you could charge them astronomical amounts for liquor in New York City. People would pay $500 for a bottle of champagne that cost $50. They would spend $20 on a cocktail. So I kind of give my former life, I just turn in the other direction, let's say. I moved to New York City, I grow my hair down to my shoulders, and I am going to become the king of nightlife in New York City. So I begin promoting these parties, climbing up the social ladder of nightlife, worked at 30 or 40 different venues over 10 years. And here's a picture of my life 10 years later. In the VIP room of a club called Crowbar. This is my business partner at the time. And we were so successful, at least we thought we were, that we were getting paid $4,000 a month by Bacardi just to drink that bottle in public. And Budweiser paid us another $4,000 a month to be seen drinking Bud at our clubs. So we're like, this is amazing. I mean, we not only drink for free, we get paid to drink. This is what we've been searching for our 10 years. Around 3 or 4 in the morning, as you can imagine, it's a less pretty sight. I have picked up, after 10 years, every vice you might imagine would come with the territory. Okay, I smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. I had a gambling problem. I had a cocaine, ecstasy, MDMA, pornography, strip club. I mean, everything short of heroin I was doing at this point. And my life looked glamorous on the outside. I'm flying around to fashion weeks, and I'm dating girls that are on the cover of fashion magazines, and I drive a BMW, and I have a Rolex watch, and I have a grand piano in my New York City apartment, and I have a Labrador Retriever. Like, what more could you want to make you happy? And I realized on a trip to South America, a kind of decadent trip, I was 28 years old, and I realized I had somehow become the worst person that I knew. I had betrayed the faith foundation that I'd grown up, any shred of morality. And I was living this selfish, sycophantic, hedonistic life that was only for me. And I realized that there would never be enough. There would never be enough girls, there'd never be enough money, there'd never be enough, somebody would always have a better car, a plane. I was in this endless pursuit of really misery, if I played it out. So it's a long story, but I basically I come across this book called The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. By the way, my parents have been praying for me for 10 years, right? They have little old ladies locked up in prayer closets, wearing holes in the carpet with their knees. And one day, I kind of wake up and say, I think I'm going to come home. I'm going to change my life. And I start reading theology. I start reading the Bible again. I wondered what the exact opposite of my life might look like. So I come back to New York City, and I try and find my way back to church and to a very lost faith. And it takes me a few months, but in the summer of that year, I sell everything I own. I liquidate my life. I put 2,100 DVDs up on eBay in a single lot. This is back when they were worth something. And I thought the opposite of my life would be serving on a humanitarian mission, right? Serving the poor instead of serving myself. So I quit life, I sell everything, I give out my apartment, and I start applying to the famous humanitarian organizations I've heard of. UNICEF, World Vision, Save the Children, Oxfam, right? Scott Harrison, the great nightclub promoter, is now ready for service. Well, I am denied by every single organization. Like, no one will touch me. So this is really discouraging because I want to serve. I think I have a lot to bring to the table, and no one will take a risk on me. Finally, one organization called Mercy Ships says if I was willing to pay them $500 a month and go live in a country I'd never heard of called Liberia that had just come out of a 14-year civil war, then I could join their mission. So this is perfect. I mean, this is the true opposite of my life. So I joined this mission in Liberia in the year 2004, and I grabbed my camera. My role was going to be the photojournalist for the mission, and I landed in the ground with 14,000 United Nations peacekeeping troops. This is the largest peacekeeping force that had ever been deployed in the history of the world at that time. to a broken country. So I'm running around taking pictures, seeing how people are living. This is the ship that I'm living on. Those of you familiar with Mercy ships, it's a 500-foot medical vessel. And for 25 years, it sailed up and down the African coast, bringing the best doctors and surgeons to people who need access to medical care, all for free. So I'm going to document the work that they're doing so that they can help raise more awareness and money. And as I traveled through Liberia, I have just never seen, this is Dr. Gary Parker. Dr. Gary was really my first mentor in the space. This guy signed up for 3 months, and that was 31 years ago. He never left. He's a surgeon from California and has given 3 decades of his life to the poor. So I have this moment before I start the mission, and I just go all in. I went out with a bang. I smoked 3 packs of cigarettes. I had like 6 or 7 beers, and I'm like, I have to just quit everything cold turkey. And I walked up the gangway, and I just kind of shed the vices by the grace of God. I mean, I never smoked again. I never touched drugs again. I never gambled again. I never looked at pornography. I just walked completely away from my old life, and that allowed me to walk into this new experience on the ship. So as I traveled through Liberia, the country is shot up. There's bullet holes everywhere. People are living in bombed out apartment buildings like this. There was 1 doctor for every 50,000 citizens in Liberia. Here I think our ratio is 1 to 180 Americans. So if you got sick in the country, you were just out of luck. People were living in houses that were once beautiful and just completely ruined after the war. So before the ship sailed, a small advance team had put up these flyers all around the country saying, we have doctors coming, we're looking for huge facial tumors, we're looking for cleft lips and cleft palates and people that have been burned during the war, people with flesh-eating disease. And if you've got one of these conditions, turn up on this day and our doctors will see you and try and schedule you for surgery. So I remember being so excited. It was my 3rd day in Africa, my 3rd day in the mission. 5 in the morning, I put on hospital scrubs, I grab my cameras, and we are rolling in Land Rovers in convoy to the football arena that the government has given us, the soccer stadium. I know that we have 1,500 surgery slots to fill. I'm like, is there any way 1,500 people are going to turn up? We round the corner, and there are more than 5,000 people that have come. I think this was that first moment that dawned on me, like, wow, we're in over our heads. I mean, we're going to turn away thousands of people who've come with hope. I later learned many people had walked from neighboring countries. They'd walked over a month with their children just in the hopes of seeing a doctor. The first child waiting in line, the first child I photographed was this little boy named Alfred. And he was 14 years old, and he was effectively suffocating to death on his own face with a benign tumor. This is his mom who had brought him. She pulls out this photo and says through a translator, this was my son 4 years ago. My 10-year-old boy was completely healthy, and then this thing started growing, and we didn't know what to do, and there was no doctor to take him to, so they took him to the witch doctors, and the witch doctors cut his face, and they put pastes on his tumor, and it just continued to grow larger and larger and larger. So we were able to admit Alfred, and it was kind of the first surgery that I saw. And a couple of days later, I watched these amazing doctors remove his tumor, throw it in a bin, and then I got to take him home a couple weeks later with a new face and watch him heal. And it was amazing. I mean, this was what my job was going to be like, documenting transformation. So this was what a typical day would be like. I'd get up in the morning and I'd go down on the ward and I would start photographing the people that were scheduled for surgery like that day. This woman's name was Martha Lean. And she told me that for 8 years this tumor had grown. And I remember this so vividly. She said, I have to cover my face in public with this towel that you can kind of see in her hand. Because she said, people stone me. They throw rocks at my face because they think I'm spiritually cursed. And it was a 40-minute surgery just to remove a very benign mass. So it was an intense experience. I spent the first year, I took 50,000 photos. Now, you have to remember here, at this time, I am blasting my club list of 15,000 people with these stories. So they go from getting invited to the Prada store opening in Soho, New York, to like, Alfred is suffocating to death on his face. Right, so this is also when email open rates were 100%. So there were definitely a few unsubscribes, take me off of his list right now. But most people began to write back and say, how do I give money? How do I help? How do I volunteer? And I realized the power of stories to move people to action. So I signed up for a second year, and this time, on the second tour, I got off the ship more, and I experienced dirty water for the first time. And I saw that in the rural villages, people were drinking unthinkable water. They were drinking from green swamps. And I saw teenage girls like Hawa just drinking and bathing in water that I wouldn't let my dog drink. And I learned that half of the country was drinking dirty water. And I also learned the link between the water that people were drinking and the disease that we were seeing. So it's a long way of saying over 2 years, I became interested in water really because of medicine. And I was encouraged by these surgeons to go and work on this problem. They're like, man, if people had clean water, we wouldn't have 5,000 people standing outside a stadium. Just the shock of comparison for me, too. Watching someone drink dirty water for the first time. In our clubs, we would sell water for $10 a bottle, and people would just order 5 of them and not even open them. And I learned that children were dying of dysentery, of diarrhea, of these preventable diseases. So I come back to New York City, and I'm 30 at the time, and my friends think I'm no fun because I won't party with them, and I make them look at dirty water pictures and tumor pictures. So, I'm like, well, you got to help me. There's a responsibility to do something about what I'd seen. So I have my mission. I have the issue that I am going to latch onto, that I'm going to fight for, and that is to end the water crisis. I was very clear about this. I wanted to see an end to the water crisis in my lifetime. I wanted to see a day on earth where everyone had clean water to drink. Everyone had access to the same thing I had, just being born into a suburban family. And I'll just tell you a little bit about the problem and then what we've tried to do about it. So today, 663 million people, 10th of the planet, are living without access to clean water. Now again, this is unthinkable for most people here. You've had clean water to drink your whole life, and we take long showers, and some of us have bottled water every day. But for a 10th of the planet, for 660 million people, they've never had clean water to drink. And sometimes when we hear these big statistics, you just kind of numb out. So what this is, the water crisis, is just kids like John Bosco, a teenager in southern Rwanda, walking into water like this to fill up his yellow jerry can and then take it home to his entire family. It's kids like this in Honduras, a little girl who's drinking from the river. This looks more like chocolate milk to us than anything we would consider drinkable. And as you can imagine, there are so many diseases associated with bad water. Everyone's heard of cholera, you've heard of E. coli, maybe you haven't heard of schistosomiasis, which is a fancy word for worms. Over 200 million people right now have worms crawling around in their body because of the dirty water that they've had to drink. This is actually what this looks like. Oh, this is a World Health stat. So 52%, according to the World Health Organization, of disease in the developing world is water and sanitation related. This child in Kenya was drinking from the Molo River, and I remember, I'll never forget taking this picture. She was drinking, and then every time she would drink, she would vomit on her shirt. Imagine watching a child forced to drink water that made her sick in the moment. I took this bottle away from her, and we promised to try to find a more sustainable solution for the village. But I gave this to a lab in New York City, and they put it under a microscope, and they sent me back this video, and they said, the water that you sent us was alive. I remember they said, we're not experts in all the different kinds of amoebas and parasites, but you sent us water that is alive. Nobody should be drinking that. Leeches were a huge problem as we traveled around. I had never once associated drinking water with leeches before, but the communities would hold out their hands and they'd say, we have to pick these leeches out from our water, and if we don't strain them out, sometimes they grow up inside and they crawl up to the back of our throat, and then we have to use sticks or diesel fuel to try and kill the leeches. And again, so hard for us to imagine, but this is what people are dealing with every single day. I was passionate about education. If there was another issue I would have picked, education would have been a close second. And at the time, I learned half the world's schools don't have clean water or a toilet. Today, that number is a third. But imagine that. Imagine sending your child to a school without clean water or without a toilet. And this is one of the top reasons why girls are dropping out of school throughout the developing world. They get their period, they stay home 4 or 5 days a month because you're not going to a school with no water and toilet. They fall behind in their studies. And then they give into the enormous social pressure in so many of these countries where girls shouldn't be educated anyway because they're too useful around the house. And so many of them just spend their days in the hot sun walking 4 or 5, 6 hours, hauling dirty water on their backs. You can actually see one of just the heartbreaking things is to walk around in some of these villages and see women, in their 30s or 40s, and with nothing on their back, they're just hunched over because it's bent their spine over time. It's a women's issue. I guess the last thing I would say, I've now been to 68 different countries, and I've just never seen men getting water. Culturally, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it's India, whether it's sub-Saharan Africa, it is the job of the women and the girls to get the water, and it puts them in the most uncompromising positions. Women like this one in eastern Kenya just digging in the sand, trying to find water for her family. I asked her through a translator, I said, well, is there any other option? Because I don't see a lot of other women here. And she said, yeah, most of the women get water from a river, but the problem there is crocodile attacks, and people are dying all the time. And I go to this river, and this is like as if it's not bad enough to worry about being dragged off by a crocodile. This is the quality of the water. So the good news and the great thing about working on it is it's actually a solvable problem. Unlike so many other issues in the world, when it comes to providing people clean water, there's no cure that we're looking for in a test tube. We know how to bring clean drinking water to every single human being alive today. Now, there hasn't been the will to do it, there haven't been the resources allocated to do it, but we don't scratch our heads saying, how would we ever cure that person from drinking dirty water? And a lot of different things work. So if you're solution agnostic and you're not married to any one kind of intervention, a lot of different things work in a lot of different contexts. And now we fund 11 different technologies across the whole portfolio. So sometimes you can dig wells, sometimes you can drill, sometimes you can build rainwater harvesting systems, or big gravity-fed systems, or biosand filters. A lot of different things work. It's often as simple as drilling a well for about $12,000. And, this is something in New York City, some of my friends will buy houses up in the Hudson Valley, and they pay a well driller $15,000 to drill a well in their backyard for their nuclear family of 3. Well, it's not that dissimilar, and the terrible irony is that so many of these communities are living on top of massive resources, massive aquifers that could save the lives of them and their children. But what they don't have access to is $1 million of drilling equipment. They don't have access to the rigs and the compressors and the trucks and the hydrology and the local knowledge. Many of these communities are living on less than $1 a day per person. So that's what we're able to do, and the local partners will go in, find the water. This is actually the Water for Good team in the Central African Republic. You'll see there's no one in these pictures that looks anything like me. And I'll talk about that in a minute. It's the locals that are leading their own communities forward. And you have this amazing moment when you drill a well and when you find clean water. And this is that moment where they flush the well and the water shoots out of the ground and people are dancing and celebrating and clapping. Often the kids will rush the drilling rig and the parents are all trying to drag them away and they're splashing. And I'll play just a short clip. The next clip you're going to see is of a community in Malawi who spent 3 months building the road that actually allowed the drilling rig to reach their community. There was a huge, huge ravine, and every household sent one person over a 3-month period to drill the well. So just imagine being there at that moment when something you've never had in your entire life is there in front of you. This is just a clip of that opening. So that never gets old. I mean, sometimes those celebrations will last for more than a day. It's one of the most amazing things to be able to be a part of. And we've said now for 10 years, water changes everything. If we had a slogan, this would be it. We believe water is the most transformative way to lift people out of extreme poverty. It impacts the health of every single person it touches. It impacts the education when it's brought into schools, when it's brought into communities and kids have clean water near their house, they have it at their school. And it really impacts the lives of women. And not only does it improve the health, but it gives women time back. I was saying earlier to a group of people, 40 billion hours are wasted in Africa every year just by women collecting water. That's not even useful. So we hear these extraordinary stories of women becoming entrepreneurs and starting small businesses, women that are selling rugs at the market or rice or peanuts. Some women tell us that they just get to spend more time with their families. They are better mothers because they're not leaving them 7 days a week to go and fetch the water. And one of the best things of all is that it's one of the few things in the world that everyone can agree on. And there are less things these days, let me tell you. I mean, people are fighting about everything today, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's geography. But every human being, regardless of their differences, can stand for clean water. I have yet to be told, coming off of a stage, Scott, stop doing that. Please stop giving people clean water. Like you're wasting your time. And it's been a terribly unifying way to bring people who would never agree on anything else together, but who think kids should not be drinking river water and can band together to form a solution. So, okay, the organization. This talk is supposed to be Reinventing Charity. So here's how we did that. So that was the issue, okay? How do you create an organization that makes a huge impact on a problem most people don't think about? And how do you impact a lot of lives? Okay, so I'll take you back to the beginning, 11 years ago. This is where it all started. My nightclub promoter friend took me in to this Soho apartment. He let me sleep on the closet floor, it was a walk-in closet floor, and said, this can be your first office. And I was running around telling everybody, I want to end the water crisis. I want you to give money for water projects. We're going to do this. And I learned that this was not going to be easy because people don't trust charities. Now, I'm talking to an astute, philanthropically minded group. I was not then. I was a club promoter talking to people, who were not giving. And I actually learned that this was a wider problem than just my friends. A USA Today poll found that 42% of Americans distrust charity. Now, no one has more of a reputation than Americans for being generous, but almost half of the givers or eligible givers feel betrayed by the system, feel distrust. NYU Stern did a study of the same thing, and they found 70% of Americans thought charities either A, wasted money, or B, badly wasted money. So in order to make a big dent in the water crisis, we would have to solve this problem. And I was so interested in getting these people to give. I wasn't after other charities' money. I wasn't after World Vision's donors or UNICEF's donors. I wanted to reach out to the people who weren't giving, who didn't trust, and give them an organization and a business model that they could believe in. So the first problem that we had to deal with was the money flow. I would just hear that more than anything else. I don't know where my money goes. I give to this charity. How much is actually going to reach the people at the end of the line? Charities are black holes. They're inefficient. So I thought, okay, well, what if we could take that problem and just obliterate it? What if we could completely take it off of the table? I said, what if there was a way to reinvent charity? And here's how we're going to do it. We would give away 100% of every donation we would ever take, and it would directly fund water projects. And people are like, well, that's the stupidest thing we've ever heard. Like, how will you actually pay for staff or an office or even your flights around the world? I didn't have a good answer at the moment. But I did open up 2 bank accounts and said they're never going to touch each other. 100% of the public's money goes directly to the field, and we're going to be so crazy about the integrity of the 100% model, we'll even pay back credit card fees. So if someone donated $100 on the American Express, we get 96. Thanks, Amex. but we would make up that 4% and we would send the intended $100 to the field. Somehow in the other bank account, we would try and find visionary donors and philanthropists, maybe foundations, maybe corporations, I didn't know, that it would actually get excited about paying for the overhead. We would make overhead cool. That was idea number one. Idea number two was realizing that we have now created a non-fungible money flow. So could we prove where these dollars went? Because we would never step on them. And could we use the technology available to connect donors to the impact of their money? So CharityWater was fortunate to start the same year as Google Earth and Google Maps. Now it feels like we've had that thing forever, but it's 11 years old. And I realized that Google was giving us a free place where we could put up every water point we would ever fund anywhere in the world for the public to see. We could build a hyper-transparent organization using technology to do that. So we said that. We made that promise. We will never fund a project unless anyone can go and visit them all. And that's true. Everyone in this room right now could go get a GPS device from Best Buy for $50, pull the data set off our website, and go visit projects in 24 countries. We think it would take about 18 years, but it's all there and has been from day one. The third thing was I wanted to build a beautiful brand. Now, as I looked at the charitable sector 10 years, I didn't see anything that looked like Apple or Nike or Virgin. Charities, they had anemic brands. Their websites were awful. And charities used guilt and shame to manipulate people into giving. And if you look at the great brands of the world, does Nike use guilt and shame? No. That would be like Nike saying, hey, you fat, stupid person, turn off the TV, put away the Doritos, and go out for a run. All right, well, no one is wearing a swoosh if Nike talked to people like that. And that's not what Nike says. Nike says there is greatness within you. You can run farther than you ever thought. You don't have an arm, you can play basketball. Lost a leg, you can run a marathon. And that's why people rise to that occasion when they're spoken to like that. And I just didn't see that happening in charities. I thought it was kind of a bummer. I mean, there was no fun in fundraising. So Nick Kristof had written in the New York Times that toothpaste is peddled with more sophistication than all the world's life-saving causes. Like Doritos, right, can spend hundreds of millions of dollars marketing stuff that kills us and our children. And the causes that are saving lives have, I don't know, lame marketing. So I wanted to try and fix that, and I thought you don't need a lot of money to build a brand. You need good taste. You need to create a culture where people want to leave Apple and Virgin and Tesla and design for good. And you need to care about the way that you design things, the way you present the brand into the world. Most important thing about the business model was we would use local partners, and I hinted at that earlier, but I had seen some Westerners that look like me try and drill wells in India or Bangladesh or Africa and just kind of make a mess of things. So we said our role is going to be raising awareness, getting people to care, raising money as efficiently as possible. But for the work to be sustainable, it had to be led by the locals. They would be the heroes. They would be the ones getting the credit. And that turned out to just be one of the most amazing things, to be able to employ and grow local teams. Just a story, this guy on the bottom right, Joe Madiath, Orissa, India, saw his grandfather, when he was a child, feed one of the Dalit workers from a hole in the ground. And he said to his grandfather, "Why would you feed that man like you feed our dogs?" And his grandfather said, "Because that man is a dog." Something in Joe snapped. And for 35 years now, he's been using water and sanitation to bring equality to the poorest people in the world. And he leads a team of 500 people. So that's just a profile of a local partner. This is a Water for Goods driller, Marcelan, in the Central African Republic. Drilling through the war, risking his own life. He's now brought clean water into over 1,000 villages, leading a local team of about 50 people, 50 Central Africans that are taking the money raised by Water for Good and turning that into clean water for their own people. The final thing is, I didn't want to start a religious charity. I mean, first of all, I don't even know how I would have necessarily done that, because those weren't the people I knew at the time. But I sensed as I talked to people that there was this real distrust of religious organizations. There was a sense, okay, go and kiss the cross, and then we'll give you water. Oh, let's make sure we build those wells at the churches. And I wanted this, I just had a bigger vision. I wanted this to be something that brought together people of all faiths that could actually come together and bring clean water to people in need. So we've never had any religious affiliation, and my faith story has been completely separate from the organizations, which has allowed us to have a diverse group of faith supporters around the world and people of no faith. So day one, the only thing I knew how to do to get this thing started, I was not very creative, was to throw a party in a nightclub for my birthday. So my 31st birthday, I lured everybody there by giving them open bar for an hour. And I said, on your way in, you have to drop $20 in a bin, and 100% of the money is going to go help people get clean water. So we raised $15,000 that night, and we immediately take the money to a refugee camp in northern Uganda, where 31,000 people were drinking from a swamp. And we do our first few wells. We fix a few, we hand dig a few, and then we send the photos and the GPS and the video of clean water flowing back to the 700 people that came to the party. It was like that eureka moment. I mean, people wrote us back and said, we never expected to hear from you again. I mean, this is amazing. For $20, I can see that I was part of a community and something actually happened that's tangible. And we said, well, let's just keep doing this. Let's build this into the business model. Let's find new and interesting ways to connect donors to the impact, to close the loop. And if we can continue to do this, maybe people will continue to give and the organization will grow. Okay, so we try to just get people to think about the issue differently. So this was a campaign early on where we shot a bunch of rich people in New York City in the same situations as the people we were seeing around the world. What if that was your mom? What if it was, kids going to a private school that had to haul water on their backs? I made some of my banker friends put on fancy suits and go up to Central Park Pond. How's that feel, guys? To lug your own water back to Goldman Sachs. We wound up doing exhibitions with these photos and just trying to get people to think differently. We also said we don't have to take ourselves so seriously all the time. We can have a little bit of fun. Try making Kool-Aid without water, Try giving your kid death in a baby bottle. Well, 4,500 kids were dying every day. And we wound up getting donated media because the creative was good and people wanted to help us tell our stories on buses and taxi tops and TV commercials. We built a digital-first organization. So in 11 years, we've never sent a piece of direct mail because we just thought that was stupid. At least the people that we knew wouldn't respond if we bought their physical mailing address and then sent them paper and then asked them to put a check in a self-addressed stamped envelope. That was not going to be the future of the organization we were going to build. So we became the first charity to get 1 million Twitter followers, and then we became the first charity to use Instagram. So we believed that the movements of the future would be driven in part by young people, and they would be telling their stories. They'd be sharing the stories, not through the mail, but using social media. And when we did that, we always tried to celebrate our community. Look at them. Look at the people in Paris raising awareness. Look at the people doing water walks. Look at the people who are, resisting the apathy and actually taking action. And what we've tried to build into the organization is this overwhelming value of gratitude. Right? They are the heroes. Our community, they're the heroes. And about 5 years ago, we shut everything down for 2 days, and we made 250 individual thank you videos for an audience of 1. We took 250 supporters, and we took people who had only given $30. They had done a lemonade stand and raised $9, and we made them videos from our entire staff and said, hey, we made this video just for you. Valentine's Day last year, same thing. We shut down the organization and we just made individual Instagram videos for people who had contributed to the organization. We partnered with unlikely brands. So we went into Saks Fifth Avenue in New York and we said, you guys sell expensive purses, like $5,000 purses. That's crazy. We have some $5,000 wells and we should totally be partnering because we're both in New York. I think for some reason they're like, we have never heard anything just that outrageous. And they wound up shooting their campaigns in water for 2 seasons. They wound up giving us the windows of Fifth Avenue for a week after Giorgio Armani took his windows down, giving us the windows in Beverly Hills, California, and in Chicago. And then they got their staff involved, and they got their employees involved, and they got their vendors involved, raised $700,000, made it look easy. The Macallan came to us afterwards and said, we make this expensive whiskey in Scotland, and we want to help because there's a lot of water used in the production of whiskey. And they got this idea to take a 94-year-old Macallan on a world tour, and if you wanted to taste it for like this much, 5 centiliters, you had to drop $5,000 to CharityWater. We're like, you people have lost your mind. I mean, we don't know how old your whiskey is, but no one's going to pay you $5,000 for it. That single bottle raised 605 grand. Broke the Guinness World Record 4 times over. We partnered with American Express. We're on their homepage for 3 months. They ran a big ad campaign talking about the water crisis and how everyday people could get involved. We made friends with the Nasdaq and the New York Stock Exchange and said, hey, if a company ever kind of bails out at the last minute, call us up and we'll open up the Nasdaq. So we've done this like 3 times now. We'll get a call at 8 o'clock, like, hey, can CharityWater please come the next morning and open up the Nasdaq? Same thing with the New York Stock Exchange. It's great. Our employees love this. But it's just free awareness. It's just a way to get people thinking about water and thinking about the organization. Birthdays. So this was the idea that we stumbled onto that was really an idea for everybody. And on our one-year anniversary, I thought, I threw a party in a nightclub. I don't want to do that again. What if I donated my birthday and turned it into a giving moment? I certainly don't need socks or a wallet or a tie or a gift card to Amazon. I have everything I need. People don't even have clean water. So what if we could almost redeem the materialism of birthdays? And we could donate our birthdays so that other people could have more birthdays. There's someone here tonight I just met that has raised over $30,000 by giving up her birthday for the year. So this started out with this 7-year-old kid in Austin, Texas, Max Schmidhauser, starts knocking on doors asking for $7 donations. He's cute, raises $22,000. He also lived in a nice neighborhood, I'm not gonna lie. Tony Hawk, the skater, donates his birthday on social media. Jack Dorsey, who created Twitter and then created Square, donated 3 birthdays, raised almost $200,000. Angela Ahrens, who leads 51,000 employees at Apple Retail, just sends out an email and is honored with over $100,000 in donations for her birthday. Will and Jada Smith in Hollywood donated both of their September birthdays and then encouraged their fans to do the same. And then they actually came with me to see the impact that they and their fans had made in Ethiopia. All that was great, but what was honestly, so much more exciting to us were just the everyday kids like Lori in New York City, donating his 6th birthday. Maggie Moran, donating her 16th. Nona Ween, one of my favorites, donating her 89th birthday. And her mission statement that she wrote on our website was, I'm turning 89 and I'd like to make that possible for more people. That's kind of a profound thought. She's lived double the life expectancy in many of these places where we're working, and if her birthday could help people have more birthdays. There's a little girl in Seattle, and I'm going to share this story with you. She had heard me speak at her church, and she donated her 9th birthday, and she set a goal of raising $300, and she fell a little short. And then right after her birthday, she was killed in a car crash. And her church community came around her last wish, which was a canceled birthday party, and people that she had never met, a desire to get them clean water. And they started to give to her campaign, and it spread around the world, and it spread to Europe, and it spread to Africa. And people in Africa started donating $9 to this little girl's campaign and in her memory. I met her mom and her grandparents, and I got to take them on the 1-year anniversary of her death to Ethiopia to meet thousands of the children that had gotten clean water because of Rachel. And I just really, to honor her, there's so much for each of us in her story, the purity of heart, the depth of compassion in a little child who just says, it's not okay, not on my watch, and how this touched people. So this short video is of that trip, and I think it's a nice way to honor Rachel. So Rachel wound up inspiring over 40,000 people to give, helped 37,000 people get clean water. What was amazing was so many of those people then followed her lead in the coming years that they raised another $2 million. So this little girl has impacted over 100,000 people's lives with a vision of helping 10. What it helped CharityWater really put a point on was, CharityWater was never our story, right? It's the story of Max, it's the story of Nona, it's the story of Rachel, it's the story of Marceline, it's the story of the supporters, and it's the story of the local heroes. And we're the guide, so we never, ever, are the hero in the story. And we just need to continue to invite people to bring the best of themselves, their birthdays, their races. There's a guy here tonight, Josh, who did 30 races to raise money for CharityWater. To bring the best of themselves, their talent, their creativity in the service of others. We started focusing just quickly on sustainability and making sure that clean water continued to flow around the world. And as we expanded to 24 countries, 25,000 water projects, we won a grant from Google of $5 million to go and build a sensor that would be able to detect when water stopped flowing, when things didn't work. And we piloted 3,000 of these, and you can see what it looks like here, just a nondescript gray box that costs about $100, protecting a $10,000 or $12,000 asset. And now what we're able to do is to go into many of Rachel's wells 5 years later and sit down with her family and pull up one and say, hey, you know what? 5 years later, Rachel's impact continues. And here's how much water is flowing at the village of Beato. And look at a chart over the last couple weeks and pick out, a day of the week and say, a couple days ago, 1,579 liters, 1,570 bottles of clean water flowed 5 years later from the vision of a child and is continuing to serve people in that community. In 11 years, a lot of the things has worked. If I had more time, I would love to share so many more stories, but we've been able to raise now about $300 million from over 1 million people. So this has been led by small donations, by the grassroots, a lot of it happening online. We've been able to help 25,000 villages get clean water, 8.2 million people. So, impact around the world. One of the things I'm so proud of is we now support 1,600 local salaries. So there's 1,600 locals that are supported by CharityWater in these countries. They're out there getting the credit. They are amazing. They're amazing. Stop by and talk to Jim about his team. There are guys that are drilling 29 out of 30 days of the month, trying to optimize the entire dry season because for 4 months it rains and they can't drill at all. And they make great sacrifices to go out and do that. I'll end just with John Bosco's story because this is what it is all about for us, to take a little boy, to tell his story, to say, hey, no family, no kid should be drinking water like this. And then everyday people respond, they give their birthday, drilling rigs start heading towards his village. And in this case, he watches local Rwandans. I mean, imagine for a teenager, the heroes that they are. Jump out, start drilling a well, find clean water. 3 days later, start making the well. And less than a week later, this little boy is drinking clean water for the first time in his life. Now, one of the cool things is going back to these projects. So we visited him a bunch of times over the years, but on our 8-year kind of later trip, we found that our boy, John Bosco, is now very much a man, and he's married, and he has a daughter, Jean-Marie. And what an amazing thing to think that she will never have to drink from that swamp, which is also why the sustainability of the projects is so important. But that the cycle of water poverty is broken in that village. It costs $10,000. We've been able to do that now in over 25,000 villages. So as we look forward, 8.2 million people, it's a lot of people. It's 117 Colt stadiums. I did the math before I came. It's a big stadium you guys have here. So it's this filled up 117 times over, but it's 1.2% of the problem. So we need to go about 80 times faster and do 80 times more to see that number come down to zero. And that's what gets me on planes, to leave my 2 young kids and my wife and to tell the story and to advocate for people who can't be up on a stage and they can't be telling their story to you. Final thoughts. Some of you might say, well, how do you actually give away 100%? I always forget to talk about this, so I put this in. How do you give away 100%? There are 135 families that make up a giving program called The Well. And all of their money supports our 80 staff and our overhead and our office and our flights. 135 families have made it possible for 1 million people and counting to have a pure experience. And it's business leaders, it's the founders of Twitter and Facebook and Spotify, it's business executives at Apple, people that say, we want our money to help you grow the organization. We get it. And CharityWater would not be CharityWater without these people that are backing us. And they give on 3-year terms at levels from $60,000 a year up to $1 million a year. And this is how we are able to preserve the 100% model. Just to tell you, credit card fees now cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to pay that back, but we are serious about never breaking the 100% model. If you want to know how you can help, some of you obviously might be able to give up your birthday or run a marathon for CharityWater or paint, or we have kids doing lemonade stands. We have schools that I just met here involved that's done a couple wells already. The most important thing for us as we kind of look into the next decade is actually a brand new program that we created, and it's called The Spring. And we realized that as the organization grew, we were really growing off one-time gifts, and every January 1, we would start over. And we said, I wonder if we can build a community of people who will show up until we actually end this problem, who will show up month in and month out in the same way they show up for Netflix or Spotify or Dropbox or HBO, except they're going to get no benefit from this subscription program. 100% of the benefit is going to be passed on to others. So we launched this idea, we called it The Spring, and we kind of anchored it around $30 a month, which is what it costs to give one person clean water. We said some people can give less, some people can give more, but 100% of the money will go, and we will show the impact of this community. It's now grown in the first year to 94 different countries around the world. We just broke 19,000 members tonight. And this is probably the number one, if I was just going to say one way that you can engage with us or start, it would be to join The Spring. Just go to charitywater.org/thespring to learn more, or you could find it on our homepage. And then, again, locally, these guys are amazing. Water for Good is here tonight. Jim Hocking, their founder, Rich. And just know that as you talk to them, there's an amazing team in Central Africa that is taking the money, taking the donations, and turning it into clean water for their own people. So I would encourage you to get involved with them as well on a local level. That's all I have. Thank you guys so much for listening. My favorite quote that I'll leave you with is somebody took this 10 years ago passing a bodega, and it's really become like my life's mission. Do not be afraid of work that has no end. Right? Because when we solve the water crisis, we're not going to just drop the mic and go work at a bank. No offense if any of you work at a bank, but we're going to take our community and everything we learned, and we would focus on another issue, on hunger, on a justice issue, on shelter. If your work is truly to end the needless suffering of others, if you're working in the spirit of generosity and compassion, it has no end. And that's okay. And I think if you embrace that, you can live an amazing, meaningful life in the service of others. So I'll leave that with you. David, I think we're going to have a quick chat. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Standing up.
Oh.
Thanks, man. Wow, well, we really had a great treat to learn a lot about CharityWater, but really about some of these key principles in which you're working with. And I know a lot of people particularly would want to ask the question, you've connected with all types of donors, but particularly young donors have found CharityWater sort of really kind of compelling. So for the wide variety of charities, nonprofits, organizations here, what kind of advice, without replicating CharityWater, would you say to engage with younger donors?
Storytelling is incredibly important. Younger donors are not responding to statistics and numbers, which a lot of organizations are still kind of pushing out white papers. There was a study recently about a huge multinational organization that I won't name, that they looked at the entire website and they found that 90% of the PDFs had never gotten one download. So
that's like some of the
extreme,
academic papers that I write.
That's not how to reach young donors. I think the fundraising is a great way for young donors. A lot of people can't give, right? They're dependent on their parents' money, but there was a girl in Seattle that just did 12 lemonade stands for CharityWater. One of them in the rain, and her mom's like, "You gotta come in, you're gonna get cold." She's like, "No, I am gonna stand out here in the rain." At her 12th lemonade stand, she convinced a local band to perform on the sidewalk.
Wow.
To attract lemonade buyers. And she's now raised $5,600 selling lemonade. Her family together can't write that check.
Yeah.
So I think just giving, inviting people to use their talent, to use their creativity, and having a concrete, like she knows that her money is going to help people get clean water.
Right.
So having that concrete, if I go and stand in the rain, what's going to happen? And she knows, and then we're able to show her. We actually showed her the photos and the GPS of the project that she shared with others.
Well, I know we have some questions that the audience might like, and I'll just take the prerogative to ask one more while you're looking for anyone who might want to ask a question. But I would remind us that these are short questions, so think about you have a matchstick in your hand, and if you haven't got your question asked by the time you get to the bottom, then we'll... But one question in particular would be, well, it's a beautifully simple topic, but one thing in particular around story would be, it sounds like I was struck by the community that you're forming. And so in many ways, not only are individuals giving, but you're forming communities. How do you form, in many ways, maybe communities in which are being formed in new ways, and in some ways your platform allows people to engage around a topic? How do you think about that at CharityWater?
Well, the one actionable thing we're able to do is tell stories of the community itself. So, in the same way that if I had more time, I would have told you about our fundraisers. The guy that listened to Nickelback for a week, like at night, and he raised $34,000. I mean, who would ever think of something like that? There was a couple, an Indian couple, where the man took the $10,000 he had saved for an engagement ring, and he bought his wife a well in India instead, and proposed and said he wanted his marriage to start on an act of radical generosity and not a ring. And so we just storytell, it's such a rich tapestry of children, of 89-year-olds, of everyday people doing extraordinary things. Just yesterday, someone commented on our social media that they canceled HBO to join the spring at $15 a month. So we tell that story, and then a bunch of people are like, well, actually, I haven't watched HBO in 3 months. So that's $45 I could have gotten 1.5 people clean water. Yeah. So I think that's what we're doing. We're just putting them forward and saying, look at what they're doing. You might be able to join them, and that might inspire you. And then having the platform, and the tech that actually allows that to happen. But when we started, we had to build all this tech ourselves.
Right.
Now there's 3 or 4 places that if you have a nonprofit, you can just white label this stuff.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks. Andrew.
Hi, Mr. Harrison.
Tell everybody what you did, because you're awesome.
Sorry, what was that?
Tell them real quickly what you did, because you're awesome.
Oh, I donated a few birthdays. I've got 4 wells with you guys. It's my favorite thing to do, so.
You're amazing.
I wanted to talk a little bit about, once a well is in a community, obviously the work is not over. There are lots of elders in communities that have a healthy, stigmatized fear of water because it made them sick for so long. And I was hoping you could maybe talk to us a little bit about what happens in communities after CharityWater builds the well itself, and how do you sustain that within communities themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we kind of think of it in terms of hardware and software. So the drilling of a well is often very easy. It's the community management, it's the sustainability, the setting up of the water committee, even agreeing on the tariffs. For these projects to be successful and sustainable, everybody in the village has to be paying a little bit of money so that when maintenance is required, there's a fund, there's a corpus that can go out and pay the mechanic $66 to come in and change out the parts. So there's a lot of training that goes into that. Up to 15% of the cost of any of these wells will be the actual cost of our partners doing the training. It's not even that, it's sanitation training, it's hygiene training. If you actually want to impact health, Hygiene alone, just hand washing, has a greater effect than clean water. But clean water earns you the right to talk about hygiene training. Nobody wants to come into John Bosco's village and be like, hey guys, I really love your disgusting, scummy swamp. Let's talk about hand washing. It's that whole software side is really, really important. Sometimes people ask about, is there conflict? Now that one community has a village and the one nearby doesn't. What we find, we started off by trying to dot the map in just the areas of greatest need. And we would go to these villages and they would say, we're great, but what about our neighbors to the east? What about our neighbors to the north? And what we found actually is that they would put too much pressure on the well by sharing it. So it wasn't this kind of like, oh no, this is only ours and our 250. They're sharing it with 2,000 people, which means the maintenance issues are greater. The well's breaking down more because it's being used much more than it should. So a lot of our partners now are just working in clusters where we're going to go into a region and give everybody clean water, which reduces the stress on them. So there's a lot of kind of dynamics that are unique in every country. But it's the work, in some ways, the work only begins when you drill the hole.
Thanks, Scott.
Or whatever the solution is.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start off, my question might be a little bit blunt, so I'll start off by saying, I really do admire what you've done with this organization, but as a social work student, I am wary of, I guess, this phenomenon of white saviorism, where Americans tend to want to help people outside of our country, but not within our own borders. What does CharityWater plan on doing to help citizens in Flint, Michigan, who still do not have access to clean water?
Yeah, great question. So we looked at this. We bring zero expertise to Flint, Michigan. We have no expertise navigating political systems, and we have no expertise when it comes to billions of dollars of infrastructure repair. So we work in the developing world for 11 years with the rural poor. We don't even work in urban in these environments. Of the 663 million people, 18% live in urban and peri-urban areas, and 82%. So we've only built the rural expertise over the years. What we did is we told our community to go and support a bunch of local Flint, Michigan organizations. So you can find a bunch of stuff on our website where we said, please go and support these organizations that are both advocating for the political change needed, that are advocating for the massive billions of dollars of infrastructure needed. But that's not our focus area. I mean, we've had people say, why aren't you building schools? Why aren't you working in the Navajo American Indian region? That's not the expertise that we built. So what we do is we shine a light on other organizations that are doing great work, and we try and send our donors there.
Thanks, Scott. Andrew, over here.
Thank you. One of the things that stood out was the comment that you weren't going to start a religious organization. If you're in my shoes, in which I am part of a religious organization that is looking at living water and safe water for everyone, and I understand the challenge that you alluded to of people not trusting religious people. Are you going to hold them hostage unless they make a profession of faith? And we don't do any of that. But if you were in my shoes where you've got this mixed messaging, what word of hope could you give me for being able to, get over the hump?
I think first of all, there are Christian organizations or religious organizations that have reached $1 billion per year in revenue. So it's been done. I think they're very clear about their messaging, that we are led by our Christian faith, and that's an expression. And we serve people of all faiths without any strings attached. So I would say that that's the first thing, is your organization actually can't have a proselytize first and or aid in the agenda of conversion. Because I've heard that. I mean, a bunch of people have said to me in some smaller organizations, like, we only want to get people saved to save them from hell. Like, the water's just like the thing that is going to allow us to save their souls. I personally don't believe that is healthy. And that would narrowly limit any sort of donor base. I mean, no millennial Christian would sign up for that. So maybe there's a tiny demographic of people that would believe that. Believe me, I've gone to Christian conferences and they're like, well, if you're not handing out Bibles, I'm not going to give you any money. You know, and they say, well, I've had other people say, do you only drill wells for the Christian villages because you're a Christian? I'm like, what do you do, buddy? He said, well, I build houses. I'm like, do you only build houses for Christians? No. I said, well, you only hire Christian house builders, right? I said, no. Like, so, you know, where's the disconnect? So I think I don't know enough about your organization or the ethos or the legacy there, but I would say those organizations that are using the delivery of aid only as a way of converting will not succeed in the future. The organizations that are out there truly using aid because they want to improve people's lives and then are sharing their faith or are sharing, you know, the hope that they have with respect and with gentleness are able, I think, to function very well. A huge part of our donor base is atheist and agnostic, and you know, I'm very open with my faith story. You know, I speak at tons and tons of churches. You know, I haven't ever had to hide that because the organization includes everyone in the mission and serves everyone.
Thanks. Carol?
Are you seeing an impact in local economies after the water comes in, and what kind of impact are you seeing, and what happens to the local economy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that, because that was in my longer presentation. The UN published a very powerful paper, an 88-page paper by two researchers called Hutton and Haler, and they looked at the economic impact of water and sanitation. So you really have to always imagine these things as linked. Water and sanitation go together. So they found that the average dollar invested in water and sanitation yielded $4 to $8 on average, but actually they found 34x returns. So they found some extremely rural communities that it made 34 times richer, that single dollar going in. And you know, you kind of say, well, how would that happen? The most important thing is the time saved and time turned into money. Time turned into entrepreneurial venues. The second one was health. So if your child is sick 10 times a year with dysentery, I was saying earlier, you know, it's not even as much the drugs to cure your child that are as expensive as the trip to the clinic. In many of the areas where we work, it is a month's salary for a family to get a child to the health clinic. So they just die often in the village. If they actually get to the health clinic, the meds are subsidized. You know, medicine for dysentery, for, you know, a lot of the big pharma has generously donated and gotten a lot of the medicine there, but it's actually getting them there. So they found its economic impact, its education impact. It's a great paper. I think we have it on our website somewhere, or if not, just Google Hutton and Haler. And they actually just updated it a couple years ago.
Wonderful.
So we say water makes people healthier and it makes them wealthier. And there's data now behind that.
That's great. Question over here?
I'll just start by saying while I was sitting here, I plugged in about Charity Navigator, and your organization is ranked at the top, so I commend you for the due diligence that's been done. I have a related question, though, that I didn't take time to find, and that is the contributions to, is it called Spring, Wellspring? How does that, what percentage would that compare to the overall donations to CharityWater?
Yeah, it's a great question. Unfortunately, we can't get Charity Navigator to look at our business model any differently, so they just roll the two bank accounts together and look at us like anyone else. So I think we are 82% programs, for those of you that think of that, and 18% admin and fundraising. I think last year was a little better, maybe 85 and 15. So that's kind of your answer on the program spend, or the grants going out to the 24 countries. Does that answer your question? If you actually look at the audit report, which is published on our website, you can see the breakdown of all that. We also, interestingly enough, because people are cynical, for 6 years we've had KPMG come in and audit our 100% model and then publish an opinion on the 100% model. So any dollar we ever spend at CharityWater on 76 staff salaries, you know, benefits, flights, et cetera, has a paper trail that KPMG actually comes in and tests and then opines on for the last 6 years. So thank you for checking that out. I've been proud of that. We have had the highest rating of every watchdog group that's ever looked at us in the history of the organization. So I take the stewardship really seriously. as well, the organization. It's always fun to speak at, like, I spoke at Deloitte's conference once. There were 6,000 people there, and people would come up afterwards and like, this felt way too good to be true, but like, we looked at your audit report and like, wow, you guys are like so efficient too. It's almost like people are surprised. I don't know, maybe it's the nightclub thing. We've hired very smart people.
You got a customer in the back.
Speaking of your nightclub experience, it seemed like in the beginning you had a lifestyle that gave you a lot of connections to high-powered individuals that also have large social networks. How much do you think that helped propel you in the beginning? And for those that are starting organizations or on the fundraising trail, what are the tips for those that don't live a lifestyle that you did before?
Yep, it's a great question. This surprises people, but those weren't our givers. The people that were, and maybe this won't surprise you if you think about it, the people that were my bottle buyers that were coming out dropping money were not the donors. If you're going out to a club at 12 and then going into an after hours, this isn't top of your agenda typically. So those actually weren't the connections that really helped. We had some really fortunate early technology donors that really led us into the world of Silicon Valley through introductions. But a lot of it was just, making 10 presentations a day, 150 speeches a year. I invited myself to speak at Twitter headquarters when there were 28 employees. I think there's 10,000 employees now. So I remember inviting myself to Facebook when it was at University Avenue, and Facebook was just starting. So there was just a lot of, can I tell the story? And then that leads to, oh my gosh, you gotta meet my friend at this family foundation. Then you get on a plane and you meet the friend at the family foundation. You open up the laptop and you tell your story for 45 minutes and they say yes or no, and then they give another introduction. Yeah. So I really believe you can do it without connections. It helped being in New York City, I will say that. There's a lot of influence, there's a lot of wealth, and it's a place now where, as an international organization, everyone comes to visit us. So people fly in from Sweden, and they stop by the office. So it's been a really good place to be located, I think, to grow an organization, quickly. And I fly a lot less, because I was doing 95 flights a year at the peak before I started having kids. And, that's a lot already. So, JFK is the best place to fly to do this work from in the world.
Indianapolis is second, by the way. JFK.
Second, yeah, I know. You have like a direct to Kenya, a direct to South Africa. It's amazing.
We're working on that. Got a couple more questions.
Well, first of all, Scott, thank you so much for what you do. Having been to Kenya and watched the young ladies and the women head out every day with the things on their back to go get water, I really can appreciate that there's water close by. I wanted to just ask you, because I always have this issue about operational cost.
Yep.
That gets into the trust factor and whether you trust an organization, but I also know that it takes good quality people in order to do this work. And so that separating it out, making it separate, doesn't mean it's not there. It's still there. And many nonprofits have to include that, or they wouldn't be able to do any of the work that they do. So I just wanted to get I know how trustworthy you are and upfront you are with it and stuff, but all nonprofits have operational costs that have to be put in somewhere. Either they do it as a separate thing like you have, or it's included into what they do to do their service. So I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that and what you would advise other nonprofits who have those same operational costs. I agree with you, basically. So that's the one kind of criticism of the organization's business model that I don't really disagree. People will say, well, it's an unfair advantage. To that, I would say, well, imagine building two businesses with zero capital, from the ground up, and then running them in perfect balance for 11 years to get the competitive advantage, in a way. So, the mission of the organization is the vision of the organization is to reinvent charity. The mission is water. We could be charity education and have raised $300 million. We could be charity shelter. Interestingly, those 135 families that are showing up to support our staff, none of them care about water. None of them came to the organization because they cared about water. They do now as they've become deeply invested. So the problem, it was unique to the problem we were trying to solve, was to take the most common objection people have And we could have said, hey, well, we're 80-20 or we're 85-15. That was not going to work for the 42% and the 70%. So we said we're going to take a different path. I talk entrepreneurs out of the 100% model. I'm like, you do not want to go down this road. Just tell people where their money is going. So that's the problem, right? So if you have the opacity and the legacy of the organizations that want all dollars to be completely fungible and sit on them and invest them, and you hear these horror stories of the organizations that are using the natural disasters to fund their endowment. And it's in the fine print. When you're all texting $5, that money is still sitting there 7 years later. So these scandals have come out, the documentaries have been made. We just said we just want to eliminate it. We don't want any gray, and we're going to do the hard work to basically curate two completely different donor bases to do that. So I think my advice to people now is just tell people where their money is going to go. And of course, I think 70-30 is appropriate. I just lost my head of HR the other day because she took a much better paying job at a crypto company. I've hired executives that have left Twitter or Zynga or Google. They're taking 50% of their salary and walking away from stock options. So it's incredibly difficult. I wish we could pay them more. I am all about people, earning a great living doing this kind of work. They should be earning an amazing living, you think, using their time and their talent in the service of the poorest people in the world. So I don't think the 100% model is needed to be successful. It was unique for us, trying to reach people that just weren't giving, that weren't going to understand the nuance of that. And I think I believe in transparency. Everything on our, every dollar has been put up on our website. It's all audited. The salary survey, you can see how much my executives are making and how much they should be making against the nonprofit New York City salary. We've just made this bet on transparency, all in from day one, and it's been a part of our culture. So I think that's what I encourage people. I was doing a podcast earlier, just saying how could some of the churches learn from CharityWater? The church in some ways is the least transparent, money intake that there is. So, a lot of people just have no idea where the money goes, what it costs to run a faith community. And we've seen some people step out into this uncomfortable transparency and win and be rewarded for that.
That's great. We have one last question.
Hi. So that kind of leads into the question I was going to talk about is the transparency is what's really interested me about your organization. And I'm always hesitant to give without knowing where that money is going and really knowing the people that it's affecting. How do you track? Is there a method to really tracking? Someone gave $30, how do you email them a picture and say that's exactly where your $30 went? Is that specific that you kind of pool money aside until you hit a certain number and then you say everybody in that pool gets an email that says this is where their money went? What kind of system is involved with creating that transparency?
Great question. So we built something proprietary called Dollars to Projects, which I think is on the website, charitywater.org/D2P or Dollars to Projects. What actually happens is this transparency happens on the fundraising platform, so it doesn't happen on all the income streams. The Spring has a slightly different reporting feedback loop, but the one that you're talking about is the birthdays and the fundraisers have now raised $50 million through fundraising campaigns. Money comes in, the 30 comes in, credit card fee gets taken out, we put that back in, every dollar is tagged, and there's an algorithm that basically then assigns that as it goes out to the projects. It actually takes us about a year to cost out the projects before we can do that assignation. So for example, if we're doing, I'm going to oversimplify, $1 million of wells in Ethiopia and they cost 10 grand each, it's 100 wells and they'd be 10 grand each. But in fact, by the end of it, we're either doing 96 wells if the price of cement or the Ethiopian birr fluctuated against the dollar, or 104 wells. So they're costing $97.21 on average, or $10,461. You get it. And then it's more complex because it's not just wells, it's wells, springs, rainwater harvesting systems, 4 technologies that all have different costs. So we built, and we have 10 engineers at the organization that just built a proprietary system to track those dollars So if you did raise $30 and your well cost $1,146, you would see all of the people that got slotted into that well. And it might be you and a $10,000 donor and then someone else who kicked it over and bridges 2 wells. So sometimes it's kind of messy, but we built the tech in-house. Blockchain is actually interesting to us because some of the, there might be a way to use some of this, to use the blockchain for further transparency and tracking of individual dollars. So we've got a team of people that's researching that.
Scott, I want to give you the last word because we started this talk with this title of Reinventing Charity. And we're not holding you responsible to reinvent charity, but we do want to, if there is a parting word that you want to leave many nonprofit leaders, community leaders, faith leaders about what changes you've seen in the last 11 plus years in this charitable sector and what kind of words you'd like to leave us, not to try to replicate CharityWater's model, but what you're seeing and what you might want to see.
No problem with that. I mean, take every single thing and please use it for all the good causes. We did a virtual reality film like 4 years ago, and people have been calling us over the years saying, "How did you shoot a VR film?" We have a whole team. We just are constantly saying, "Here's how we did it. Here's the cameras we used. Here's how the editing suite." I mean, we're really, we are hoping that the things that we stumble onto that work can be useful for others. So, we're okay being copied. What I don't like is when someone takes an entire page off of our website, copies the code, and then forgets to change the email addresses, and we get their organization's inquiries. We're like, if you're going to steal the code, at least have the emails go to you. I can't tell you how many times that's happened, unfortunately.
It's the best form of flattery.
So I would also encourage originality and inspiration and imagination. I mean, there are orgs that have copied us for 10 years, and we do it, and there's like an 18-month lag, and the same campaign happens, and we just kind of feel sorry for a culture that, there's so many great ideas out there. I don't know. I think storytelling is really, really important. I think people have done such a better job at storytelling. Yeah. The design and the branding, I can't say today about, websites. Go on Water for Good's website. It's awesome. It looks great. There are videos, there are stories. It looks like a website that is of today and not of 20 years ago. So I think the design and the branding and the emphasis, the creative talent that has come into the social entrepreneur sector is great. People are making they're making sacrifices because they're thinking about legacy differently. They're thinking about I mean, look, I turned down a job at Facebook to run something many years ago. I might have made $50 million. Didn't even think about it. I've turned down so many of these kind of for-profit jobs because that's not how I want to live my life. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in New York City with 2 kids and a wife, and we drive a Kia Sorento and I fly coach. I've never bought a business class ticket. We've raised $300 million and we've never used donor money. So you get to kind of design, the life and the impact that you want to make. But I'm pretty sure, I'm going to be able to help get over 100 million people clean water before I die, and be able to tell that to my kids. And I won't have the big house. So I think it's the energy, it's making it look fun. I love speaking at schools because it makes me feel old now, but people have said you came into my middle school 9 years ago and I have now started a charity. I took a gap year, I went and I experienced India or Southeast Asia, and I've started a charity to solve the problem I saw. So I think we can all make this look fun and and like a job that a young person would want to do, would want to work in the service of others and be willing to make sacrifices of financial, fortune potentially to do that.
Well, we're grateful for your generosity, your creativity and imagination, and your inspiration to us. So I really would love if we could thank Scott again for being here with us tonight.